Hey everyone, it's Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. This week, we bring you possibly the most connected man in property to the podcast. And what he reveals is incredible.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We buy more than £100 million worth of property every year for our clients. You can find out more about that at propertyhub.net/invest. And in the course of doing so, we run into a lot of people. We're pretty well networked, but we are nowhere near as well networked as our guest today. He routinely rubs shoulders with politicians and people at the very highest levels in the property industry. And we've pinned him down to share his secrets.
It's time for our news story of the week, and there has been big movement in the mortgage market. Really positive news. Well, it depends on your outlook, but certainly positive for first-time buyers. It's Nationwide are allowing first-time buyers to borrow 6 times their earnings. Now, if this sounds familiar, you may recall that a few weeks ago we reported that Halifax and Lloyds had moved their multiples up to 5.5 times annual income. And that was household income. So 5.5 times the household income, which was real progression and unlocked the ability for many first-time buyers to get onto the property market. So for Nationwide, one of the biggest lenders in the UK to move to 6 times earnings, has been labelled as a game changer. And Rob, I don't think that's too dramatic. It certainly is a game changer when you look at the trend that is happening here, which is the loosening up of the mortgage market.
I just find the dynamics of this so interesting because we've seen interest rates rise dramatically. And what's supposed to happen when interest rates go up is it pushes asset prices down because you can't afford to borrow as much in order to buy it. So it makes sense. But that hasn't happened. As we've seen, property prices in nominal terms have barely moved. They're maybe 2% below their all-time peak. But in real terms, as we've covered in the past, they've fallen. But in nominal terms, they haven't. It's more expensive to borrow. Property prices are still high. What do? One thing you can do is increase the duration of mortgage terms. So we're seeing more 30, 35, 40-year mortgages. What else can you do? You can loan people higher multiples. That's what's happening here. So I just find this super duper interesting. Whether it's a good thing for people to be borrowing such a high proportion of their salary, who knows? But like you said, Rob, we've seen Halifax and Lloyds go to 5.5. We've seen Nationwide now go to 6. Strong chance, I would say, of everyone else falling in line and this becoming the new normal now.
The new normal could change things, especially if you combine that with the expectation that interest rates are going to fall over the medium term. And one of the things that we regularly do is look to the future and think about, okay, where is the market going? One, because we're geeks and that's what we do anyway. But two, because we publicly talk about what we think the future holds every January. And we go on record and then we review that at the end of each year. We're going to be reviewing what we said this year in a couple of months' time. And then I'm already starting to think about what next year holds. And with these two trends, I think it really could push the market in an interesting way. Of course, we'll talk about that more when the time comes, but I think this is a really, really interesting move. There hasn't been too much innovation in the mortgage market for quite a while, actually. You could say the lenders maybe were a little complacent because they could rely on low interest rates. But now they have gone. Yes, okay, they're falling, but they're much higher than they were. This new competitive landscape makes things really interesting. So we will keep you informed with what's going on. Next week, we will have the market update, where, of course, we will bring you any fresh developments on this. And later this month, we plan to have one of our mortgage experts jump on the microphone with us to tell us what is happening in the market. So a really important month on the podcast. Make sure you do not miss an episode. And make sure you do not miss Property Pulse, because that is another way to keep in touch with what is going on. It is the best property newsletter out there by far. I am a little biased, but my good friend Rob D is a cracking writer, and I do genuinely look forward to reading it each and every week. And you should too if you haven't already subscribed to that newsletter. It's propertyhub.net/pulse. It's free. It's absolutely stacked with value, and we don't charge you a thing for it. Enjoy. On the podcast, we use our very privileged position to be able to bring you inside information, forward information of what is happening in the market. But we wanted to take that a step further today, because rather than just sharing some anecdotes from things we've heard from our well-placed sources and our experts that we interact with, we thought, why not bring one of those experts on to this show? And if we're going to do that, let's make it really special. And that's what we have this week. Nathan Spencer is possibly the most connected man in the UK property scene. because he is the founder and managing director of UK Reef. Now, if you've not heard of that, don't worry, but in the industry circles, it's the biggest event in property in the UK. Every developer that I can think of goes there. I bumped into several when I went with Rob earlier this year. We presented at this event earlier this year, and we've developed our relationship with Nathan over that time. So much so that we thought we've got to get this guy onto the podcast. So Rob D sat down with Nathan and dug into the insider world of property investment. He gives so much away in this episode, including his hotspots, but also what are politicians saying behind the scenes, behind closed doors, stuff that they're not saying publicly. That's what we get in this episode. You're really going to love this.
Most of our listeners probably aren't going to be aware of what UK Reef is. More of an industry kind of facing conference, and so they might not know what it is or what a big deal it is. So how do you sum up UK Reef? What's your pitch, to put it across briefly?
The pitch from our end has turned into kind of, it is the Glastonbury of the real estate industry. So there is something for everybody. So next year there's going to be 50, 60 activation areas that can form the style of panel discussions. It could be networking events. It can be walking tours, anything and everything. And I think the ideal is it brings together so many different disciplines from the industry together. It's very client heavy. So therefore, you've got the developers, you've got the investors, you've got the local authorities, government, and because they're there, it attracts a very, very good level of audience. So it's a festival, it's fun, it's interesting. Yes, it's an event, and there's sort of thought leadership and learning curves to have whilst there, but actually, it's just a good laugh. And I think that's why it's taken off so well.
Yeah, and I can confirm it did rain just like Glastonbury, but not as muddy. So you've got that going for you. What would you say were like the main buckets of attendees, and what were each of them there for? What are they trying to get out of it?
Yeah, so about 40% of them are what we class as clients. So we put into that bracket UK government and councils. They're obviously looking to bring forward projects, economic growth. Yes, there's some learnings to be taking, but really they're looking to grow opportunities and showcase opportunities within their regions. Within that 40% is then also the investors, the fund deployers, capital of all types, sovereign wealth funds, pension fund capital, all the way down to individual investors. The developers, the house builders are there, and end users. We class those as your Amazons, your Aldi's, your Marks and Spencer's, those that are looking to open stores or a physical presence somewhere. The wider 60% is then the rest of the industry. So that could be your law firms, the consultants, the contractors, the master planners, the agents, those who are looking for opportunities for work effectively. But there's also within that a lot of very intelligent folk and a lot of thought leadership and therefore shared ideas which can help grow businesses and create opportunities as well. But people come for all different things. Some genuinely are coming for that investment, and we do facilitation at the event where we'll put investors and developers in touch with the councils and those who've got opportunities within land. But on the other side, people are coming for true thought leadership around sustainability or infrastructure. There's lots of different people coming for lots of different things. But at the end of it, I think that real good mix of different people, then even if you're coming for thought leadership, you're not going to do that all day. You'll dwell off and you'll go on to a walking tour or you'll go to a drinks reception. So all those people end up mixing at some point anyway.
Yeah. And I think I saw you say that you had 60 MPs there. What were they there for?
Yeah, so this year we had a prospective parliamentary candidates day. So we obviously, before the general election, there was a lot of people announced as they were going to be potential MPs. We thought this was a really good opportunity for us as a business to make sure that the industry from real estate and infrastructure was at the heart of government coming in. So there was about 60 PPCs who came to the event. Our plug to them was come to the event and actually understand the industry, hear about what the issues around planning and housing, around sustainability, infrastructure, investment. And of those 60 who came, 50 of them have ended up going into Parliament. So yeah, a really good coup from our end. But at the same time, we had government there as well. So the investment minister was there because the UK government brought a delegation of investors to the UK from Asia. So he was there alongside them and supporting the industry as well. We had the housing minister, and then on the shadow side, we had the shadow climate change minister looking to understand what we can do as an industry to help a potential Labour government, which has now become a Labour government. We had Angela Rayner there, who obviously is now working in the Ministry for Housing. We had Darren Jones, who's working within the Treasury alongside Rachel Reeves. So UK government are there for numerous reasons, but really it's to keep touch with the industry. But actually we did a lot of private activity with them, roundtable discussions with some of the key stakeholders, because everyone is in one place. So it makes perfect sense. But the PPCs was a really good one for us to get 60 of those down to the event and 50 of them who've become MPs, because now we have advocates for the industry within Parliament and people who have a desire to learn more about what's happening within the world of our sector. So yeah, really, really interesting for us to have them there.
Yeah, that's great. The nature of the event is you're going to be speaking about themes that probably aren't going to come across the radars of the listeners of this show for quite a while. It's kind of, you're talking about big projects and infrastructure and things that aren't going to come to fruition for a while. So what were the main themes that came out of not just the event, but also all the conversations that you're having with people all the time that might give our listeners a heads up about things that might become relevant in the future? Yeah,
I think the key thing we're talking about is opportunities. And I think what you get from the event is confidence in quite a lot of these locations of actually, you know, we know what's coming. There might be an infrastructure project. There might be a new city centre regeneration scheme, little things that you're hearing about and seeing them talk about. You know then that you've got confidence that that area is going to be growing, particularly from your listeners' perspective. If you suddenly learn that actually Cornwall have got a new town being developed pretty close to the centre of the city of Truro and a new master plan happening, which is being driven by the council in the city centre, all of a sudden there's opportunities that are going to grow within that town. So, you know, all of a sudden there's investment opportunities that maybe you should be looking at within those areas. I think that's what it's all about. Opportunities of any size. You know, we're talking about new towns. We're talking about new infrastructure projects at a very top level, large scale projects, but that filters all the way down the value chain as well. So the overarching themes, we tend to wait until the party conference season is out of the way to understand where UK government is going to be pitching policy. And I think particularly this year with the kind of the rhetoric that the Labour government are putting around housing, whether it be new towns, whether it be the need to be transforming, there's going to be a lot of assets which need to be moved from one asset class into housing to hit those targets that the Labour Party have put down. So yeah, I think it just really allows us a PI conference to set the tone of where we want the conversation to go, because government policy plays a key role in all of the delivery thereafter and the funding that they can put into it. At the end of the day, we're all there for opportunity, whichever area of the supply chain you're within.
Talking of areas, are there any particular plans or projects that particularly excited you that you heard about?
You're throwing me one here, because if I don't say someone, they'll shout at me. I'll plug a couple that I've had in my inbox really over the last couple of days. So Blackpool is a very exciting one due to the airport kind of being redeveloped and transformed into a data hub. We've got a data centre there. The council have purchased assets to transform areas in the city centre. We were talking to them earlier about a project that they were looking to come forward and they thought they might make a loss on. And following UK Reef, they're now looking to make a large profit on the sale of a bit of land in Blackpool. That in particular is a very exciting area. The Midlands, particularly the East Midlands, I think there's so many opportunities within there. Nottingham, having worked in Nottingham for a couple of years, seeing the project that they're bringing forward in Broadmarsh, the centre of the city, that's going to become a very exciting opportunity. And with Leicester and Derby located not too far away, those areas with a new devolved mayor is quite an exciting one. And I'd say with Labour's focus on energy infrastructure in particular, they're going to be putting a lot of investment into that. That all of a sudden creates opportunity around those towns and cities on the edges. So local to me would be the East Coast of Hull and Humberside, which actually already has some of the big players within offshore wind there. Certain areas in Scotland therefore will fall into that, and even areas like your Grimsby's in Lincolnshire. Yeah, so many opportunities within those. And obviously you can't look outside of London, because obviously London is a growing market, particularly as it's pushing very much eastwards as well into the Thames Estuary growth corridor. But yeah, there's so many opportunities in so many different places that as long as you're looking in the right place and know the right information, I think there's a hive of opportunities now that we're coming back into a period where investment looks a bit more solid.
For sure. I used to live in Nottingham, and so I'm excited by the Broadmarsh development because that needed something doing to it, and now finally it is. And we met with the guys from Derby Council at UK Reef as well, and hearing about all their plans for the city centre was really exciting as well. So yeah, there's loads going on, which is great. At that point of the conference, I don't think the specifics about Labour's plans for planning reform had been announced, but I think everyone had an idea of what they were intending to do. What was the mood among the people you spoke to around those plans? Is there optimism around these new targets? Because we've had lots of new governments in the past, lots of targets, and no one's ever quite lived up to what they said they were going to intend to do.
Yes, yeah. So Angela Rayner made a massive announcement on the main stage at UK Reef, which was around how many houses they were putting in, the new towns projects they were looking to bring forward. So that was great for us. I think that set the tone of positivity in particular. I think what we then saw moving into the Wednesday, it's a 3-day event at UK Reef. So when we came into the Wednesday, we had Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, who also run a successful podcast, The Rest is Politics. They were kind of saying, working in government, they're a little bit more uncertain if those are actually achievable. Yeah, casting a little bit of doubt on it, but at the same time, I think putting down that positivity to say, actually, there's a focus on this sector. Therefore, if they don't hit all of their targets, actually, they're going to get closer to that than we have seen previously. So yeah, I think a few house builders had been quite vocal that the last couple of years had been really painful for them. Western Homes in particular is a great example of going through the planning process for 4 or 5 years, spending millions of pounds and not being able to then get the project over the line. I think what we're seeing is a government that is more open with working with our industry and is wanting to utilise our industry to drive economic growth. And therefore, there's positivity, whether we're positive the targets will be hit or not, or that the full reforms will happen that we need, who knows? But I think there's certainly an air of positivity that we've not had over the last couple of years. And that always happens with a new government, new ideas coming through. And it won't be long until the Conservatives are back with a leader to start coming back with their own ideas and pushing Labour as well. So yeah, I think it's a good period for us as an industry.
Yeah, I completely see how having certainty is good for the industry. So everyone kind of knew the change of government was going to happen. It's just a matter of when. So now they're there and they can get on with it. That gives everyone a lot more confidence in going forward. I think what our listeners are nervous about is that Labour haven't always been particularly keen on the private landlord, not even necessarily in policy, but just in sort of the way that they frame the conversation. So our listeners are quite nervous about what this government might mean when they bring forward rental reform, what might be in there. Have you picked up on anything around that?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything in addition to what's out there in the news that's circling around. And yes, I think there is more legislation that's being put down to protect those who are living within said properties. But I think the key thing is at least there's clarity on it in terms of it's going to be, yes, changes come in, but one of the biggest issues is the uncertainty that you'd be living in for a year or two, knowing a potential government is coming in that's going to make changes. At least when you know what it is and what we're stuck with, then actually it's easier to plan around it. I think it's more around trying to navigate more rogue landlords than those who are doing things right. And I hope they get to a place in the middle that works on both sides. You don't want to be kind of hammering those who are doing it in the right way, which from your listener perspective will be those. But yeah, nothing to kind of drop in from a policy perspective, not that they would want us to anyway, in terms of any big changes outside of those you've already read. And we know they're probably coming down the line of reformed policy.
So they didn't slip and confess to you that they want to destroy private landlords and then cackle evilly. So that's positive. I'll take that as good news.
The requirement of housing delivery is where they're focused. Yeah, more housing delivery frees up some of the issues that we're seeing with certain, whether it be pricing or whether it be any other challenges that they're seeing within the private landlord side of things. I think more housing supply can only be more beneficial to us as a country.
Where do you think institutional investment fits into that? Because I see a lot about sort of build to rent. Every week there seems to be a new bank or pension fund or someone announcing a new scheme or partnership. Is that something you're seeing a lot of?
In fact, post-Brexit, there's been a real opportunity for the pension funds to free up more capital to deploy in the UK market. Legal & General have been very strong at that over many years. And you're seeing people like Aviva through the creation of their capital partners arm. And you're seeing it with Phoenix Group and many others. They're starting to be a little bit more open to working. Again, the work that Labour have done in the back end is going to hopefully be fruitful over the next 12 to 18 months, where we start to see how they want to work with the private capital. And actually, they're going to work very closely with it to deploy that capital into projects, which again will only be beneficial from our side. So we're seeing that there's more interest in doing it, particularly post general election. We've had a lot more speaking to an international delegation. There's been a lot more interest from them coming back over, because actually with a new government in, a new likely opportunities, regulations, new policy, they see the UK now as a much stronger opportunity than they would have done 18 months ago. But from a UK perspective as well, the pension funds are starting to work a bit more closely to invest at home rather than overseas. So I think from my side, over the next 2 or 3 years, that could be a very lucrative area. Maybe a little bit more into the infrastructure side of things, particularly energy, rather than the likes of housing. But a lot of them are putting capital behind the large city centre mixed-use schemes. And if we can get the capital into those, it opens up opportunities around those for maybe more SME developers and investors to come into those areas as well, surrounding them.
For sure. It seems like a kind of a pure win, because that's housing that wouldn't have otherwise existed. There's a lot of shifting of stock from the private rented sector to homeowners or whatever. But if you go and again put 200 new units in, it's the right thing in the right place, then that's supply that wouldn't otherwise have been there. And so it's just wins all around.
Yeah, exactly. And it drives everything. Having more people will then benefit the local community, the shops, the retailers who are down there. It brings more skilled people into closer proximity of potential job opportunities. So, yeah, the homes are needed, particularly in those types of areas, which I think is what the likes of Derby are doing. They're putting good, solid housing in nice city centre or at least city urban locations. And yeah, they will be snapped up straight away, because actually the growth opportunities, it's coming within those areas. I think there's an undersupply that's needed to be filled.
I wanted to talk about networking for the last couple of minutes, actually, because you must be the most well-connected man in property. You seem to know just about everyone. And that's obviously something that's useful for all our listeners in terms of their investments and professionally as well. So I wanted to pick up some tips for you. How do you go about opening doors? I think networking is something that's obviously really important, but people often kind of feel a bit almost dirty about. So how do you do it well?
Yeah, no, I get you. And I'm certainly not looking at how many viewers you get and the like. I think you're slightly more well connected than me, Rob. But yeah, we do have a really good black book, and there's two forms to it. The good side that we find is connecting the right people. So, you know, if I know a developer and I can put them in touch with a council or an investor, actually, that gives me a kudos that they will then intro me to others on both sides. So make sure you're using your contacts and putting people together that are mutually beneficial. But the actual networking from a room perspective, I'm quite an introvert and have to come out of my shell quite a lot when I'm at work, particularly networking events. And I go in with the sole purpose of, well, what am I there for? And if I'm there to sell our event, or if I'm there to meet 4 or 5 key people that are in that room, I will literally just go in and do my job and exit. I find networking to be quite transactional, but that will be different to other people. Yes, you can be friends with people, and I have a lot of friends in the industry that I'll go for a beer with, but that's not really the work bit to me. The work bit is enter a networking room and there's 200 people in there. What's your job? I'll just enter as many conversations if that's my focus, and I'll walk away and try to have spoken to 50 of the room of 200. You can't do that by staying in a conversation for 15 minutes. You know, I will work a room and do 2 minutes with every group that I can find. But yeah, it's finding a niche. Different people will do it in different ways. But the niche I find is just click my head on and go, right, I'm very good at work. So what do I need to get from this situation? And if I'm target driven, I find networking easier doing it like that. Whereas many other people I know will do it as a friendly catch up with lots of people that you know, and hopefully they will then pass you on to someone that they know within circles. Different people do it in different ways, but target driven is how I find I achieve the best from networking.
And when you're talking about making connections between people and adding value, have you just got it all in your head? It's like, oh yeah, you should speak to so-and-so and so-and-so. Have you got a system for that, or is it just all mental?
Yeah, no, it does tend to be just in the head. There's a couple of us internally that talk quite frequently. There's a really good example the other day of a London borough got in touch with us. They wanted to be connected to, they'd spoken to Network Rail at UK Reef, and they had with them an international developer from Malaysia who they wanted to be connected to, and they just didn't have their contact details. So that type of thing, it's just, Malaysian investor developer, I probably know from the top of my head who works in the area around train station development. So it's a bit of a kind of a guesswork in their head of, yeah, that must be them, connected to them. Yeah, I think it's more of we know who the people are, we know who they'd find benefit from. And we've been working with these people now prior to UK Reef, we did other events as well. So we've got a network, we know, and we listen to what they want to be introduced to. It's an easy enough thing to do, and there's quite a few in the business that can do that as well.
Nathan, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much. We'll make sure that everything is linked up so people can go and find out more about UK Reef.
Rob, I'm so glad you did that interview. Nathan, super impressive guy, and the questions that you were asking, you got gold out of that. I absolutely think, after listening back to that interview, that this is something that we could do more of in the future. Let us know what you think. Do reach out to us through the social channels to let us know who you would like us to interview. Now, you may have not known of Nathan before, so we'll put our thinking caps on as well. But if you want us to bring these industry insiders to the podcast, let us know, because we can do more of that. What we can also do more of, Rob, is bring extra. Bring HubExtra. We don't like to stop at the value of just the main content of this podcast. We like to give a little bit more each week.
Yeah, we do. And I believe, Rob, learning from the experiences of an industry insider is not where we're stopping. I think we're going to learn another language.
Yeah, don't worry, we're not going to start giving the podcast in other languages, or not just yet anyway. But I recently have had the urge to pick up a new language. And it's early stages, and I'm using Duolingo at the moment. Don't worry, that's not HubExtra. Everyone knows Duolingo. But if you're not using it, it's a really good starting place. But the HubExtra I'm going to recommend this week is a app called Preply. And I've been really impressed by Preply. It's early stages for me. But what Preply does is it's a marketplace for language tutors. And you have an online lesson with these language tutors. But the filtering, for me, it's like the Airbnb of language tutoring, because the filtering is so good. You've got super tutors, they're all rated. You can really break down the criteria to what you want. If you want a Spanish-speaking tutor from Mexico, you could do that if that's what you so wish. If you want an Italian tutor based in Italy, amazing, that's there as well. The platform is huge. There seems to be endless amounts of tutors on there, all different ranges of pricing. And if you want to bring your kids on, if they're learning a language at school and you'd like a tutor for them, well, they've got tutors that specialise in working with children as well. From what I can see, most, if not all, are qualified to some level. It looks brilliant. As a platform, my recommendation is on the platform. It looks a really, really cool app. So I wanted to bring it forward this week, because whether you want to learn a language yourself, or maybe you've got kids at school who are learning a language, this could be a great find for you.
Suena muy bien. So that's us done for this week. We're going to be back with a property podcast again next week. We're also going to be back in your ears tomorrow with Any Other Business. So make sure you check that one out. Big thanks again to Nathan, and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Adios, amigos.